morning, everybody. Well, smart cities we just had, smart offices. Is that a new tag? Is this really a notion that we are going to use in the future? Actually, we are not talking about smart offices at this point of a time. We talk about flexible offices, activity-based offices, well, you name it, shared desking, next offices, smart offices. Well, at the beginning, I would like to take you for a short trip, a very short exercise, with a mental exercise of your self-positioning in terms of your work style. Please think about your typical week and how you work in terms of mobility. When we'll say it's a vertical axis, low mobility means you spend the whole week at your desk. High mobility means you spend the whole week, working week, outside of the office. And then on a horizontal axis, think about cooperation. Do you do your work individually or you cooperate? You cooperate a lot. Think about your typical week. Do you still have a typical weeks? Because personally, I think I don't have anymore any typical weeks in my diary. If I am positioned to myself, I am probably on the upper right-hand side, but I'll show you the results later, what is going about. Activity-based office is at the core of the thing. We are talking a lot about activity-based offices, and this is all around three key notions. It's about buildings, bytes, and behaviors. And I have to say, we are really good when it comes to buildings. We are very sophisticated with our planning, increasingly with planning, but definitely with development. We are sophisticated with bytes and technology. And a lot of panels in this conference has been dedicated to the technology. And my personal notion is that we are less sophisticated when it comes to the people and their behaviors in the new offices. The key dimensions of the decision makers when they focus on developing a new office, well, say smart office, is about costs. And we can define three areas of that cost. Well, location, actually, Krzysztof was telling a lot about location. People are willing to pay a lot of money for better locations. Another area of a cost attached is the space itself. It's a fit-out, furniture, design, whatever, in large notion of design. And the third area that we are paying more and more is IT, technology. But in my personal feeling, technology became a bit fetishized in a current office environment. And it's probably slightly less important than we would like to attach the value to this. Well, typical office project when it comes, it's been defined through three categories, whether it's on time, on a budget, and within specification. And that's a typical installation for every single real estate office project we do. But actually, I personally believe this is not enough. What we really should think about is a full implementation. It's about people behaviors and our business objectives. And unfortunately, quite often they come the last in a typical processes that we observe today. Why it happens really? It's because corporate culture is probably the most difficult thing to change. Actually, changing offices, it's quite easy. It's a necessity because our lease agreements, they typically last for 5 years, and after 5 years, an occupier needs to move to a new premise or extend the current lease. But actually changing culture of that team is extremely difficult exercise. And when we think about culture, we can about three levels of that. One is the values, what we have on our corporate banners. Another is real behaviors. And the third one is about unwritten rules in each of the companies. The values are the easiest one because, well, we expose them to our clients. But pretty often we talk about key values like diversity, equality, client care. But when it comes to unwritten rules, pretty often what we see, it's hierarchy, it's bureaucracy, it's really an environment that doesn't support much of a diversity in thinking. What we really can impact in that model are behaviors. We can really impact people's behaviors. And there is this nice English saying, fake it until you make it. And I'm a strong believer of that we can do with people behaviors. We can teach people different behaviors and make them really to go deeper, to start to believe in the notions that go behind that set of behaviors. So when it comes to the work style, I'm convinced that we can make people to change their work styles. Remember that mapping I've asked you before when you put your dot. Well, a lot of consultants these days, I mean furniture consultants such as Bene or Leeds, and also many others. They are saying about 4 work styles, and they are divided by mobility and type of cooperation people do in the office. When you see the 2 bottom ones, they are pillars and roamers, and they are the most common type of behaviors in the office environment. They cover around 85% of total employees. These people are very little mobile, but they differ by the level of cooperation. They are an essence of our companies. The upper you go in terms of mobility, the less people you get. It's only 15% on the top of that quadrant, and pioneers, they constitute only 5% of the office population in a typical corporate environment. But actually, pioneers, not surprisingly, they are typically leaders, and they make all decisions about the corporation, about the office, new office, smart office. So what happens quite often in the processes, the actual needs of the people who are at the bottom of that system are not properly addressed. We do, and that's at the core of a problem we have as a consultants today. We do a lot of activity-based offices, but the big question is whether that activity-based office suits everyone in the same manner. There is a growing suspicion that activity-based office, as we implement it today, in many cases is the most useful only for 2 top groups of users who are already mobile. And they don't serve that well users who are not very mobile. And this is increasingly on the Polish market, in my feeling as a consultant with really a number of projects already delivered under my belt, this is at the essence of a problem we might be facing in the future, that we are delivering a very fancy concept, but not really changing the minds of the users. Because what really needs to be done is a cultural alignment between the office, between the space itself and a team. And in this very simple metrics, we are just pointing out at two very popular models in Poland. Traditional office, traditional culture. When they align, it's all fine. But this is definitely not a smart office then. We need activity-based office culture, and we need activity-based office space in order really to get a smart office, in order to really make everything click in place. But the other 2 options, they are failures. They are the problems when we have traditional office for a very smart team, or we have a smart office for traditional team, which is actually that case. It happens more and more often. So I'm just trying to say is that be careful. Whenever you do a very modern office, you need to make people sign into this. Because new office and a new space is a big change. It's a big shift for everyone. We argue that relocation to the new office is probably one of the largest changes possible in organization's life. Companies can do more than ever in their history when they relocate. They can change a lot of things. They can change behaviors. They can change reporting models. They can really reorganize themselves, rethink themselves. But they really need to put energy and thinking into this. And there is this famous change curve that every one of us needs to go through. And one of the reasons I'm showing is that there is a big resistance growing whenever an office space is not properly adjusted to the cultural need of a group of users. So what smart office means to me, smart office means to me a full alignment between space itself and the users. And to do that, we really need to build awareness of that, and we really need to build engagement of people into a new concept. In order to get people on the side of a smart office, we like to apply a caste model with champions, agents, sponsors, and targets, so everyone else in a given group. Key people to every change are sponsors. So possibly people like you sitting in this room, possibly those pioneers who need to sign in for the project and who need to support the project throughout the phases. We also need other groups of users really interactive in that new office, because otherwise we will end up with a box that is not filled with a context. That's a big fear of many projects that are being delivered this day. So actually, Just to sum it up, want to quickly. What a smart office means to me. A smart office probably means a full alignment. And we are moving from 3B, which is bricks, behaviors, and bytes, into 3A, which is asset, analog, and active. Well, office, we need to start to think about office as an asset instead of a cost. And this is a message to decision makers. Office is not a cost anymore. This is a way to change people. This is your most active, precious asset. It costs you around 15 to 20% of all operational costs, so it's expensive. Analog. Analog in a sense that IT technology it is very important and it will be there, but it will be there as an infrastructure and not as a fetish. We see a lot of projects these days coming with fancy screens, panels, technology everywhere, whereas in reality, if you ask millennials, they think about technology as something being available on your smartphone. So probably there is a big mental gap between those two generations because X generation thinks about technology in a different way than millennials. And the third area, probably crucial area, the smart office needs to be active. It's not about delivering a finished product. It's not about a box. It's about experience design. It's about constant change, even throughout your leasing time, even throughout the 5 years you are living in a space. And it's a space that needs to change with the users. Because one thing we are sure in this life is that it's going to change. So a smart office is an office that's going to change. That's my message for today, and I don't have my panelist. I would like to invite you to the discussion. We have another 15 minutes to discuss it. As people think that wellness is another fancy trend coming to the Polish market. And in some sense, it might be treated like that. But actually, I think it will be very useful on our market to talk about wellness, to think in this category, simply because this is a shift from the logic of a big occupier into the logic of an end user. This is something that we did in other commercial markets, like a retail market, already a moment ago. We stopped to think about a big tenants, we started to think about end users. And when you start to use a logic of an end users, a lot of things turned out. For example, most of our buildings, historically, they weren't built for the right group of users. They were built for white males in their 40s, whereas in reality, most of the users, they are in Poland, white female in their 20s. And they have a different needs. They have a different needs with regards to air conditioning, temperature, and it shows throughout the table that we don't really recognize, actually, in a sophisticated manner, we don't recognize the needs of our users. So the wellness trends is there to help us to really understand what we are doing in the offices, what we would like to achieve there. Just before, in a panel before, Czarek said that we spend 70% of our time in the buildings. Actually, Wellness Institute says that we spend over 80% of our daily time in the buildings. And think about your day. Do you spend 2.5 hours a day outdoor? Because most of us, we don't. Office and buildings, they became a natural ecosystem for human beings, and we need to start to think about them as ecosystems. And wellness is just about this. Offices as ecosystems for people. Do you have any other question?
What is your take on co-working spaces in this industry of the new office spaces?
Co-working it turns out to be another tag word for many, many different phenomena covered into this. Co-working, first of all, comes with the notion of a startup working. So basically, a space for new companies, for small companies and freelancers. In that sense, there is a little space for them in a corporate environment. Although many corporates, they are trying to incorporate co-working. Say Coca-Cola or a number of banks, they are building this kind of co-working spaces for startups, for individual entrepreneurs, for the subcontractors, in order to cooperate them in a more close manner. So, but we think nowadays co-working will be another thing that corporate world will thrive on, and the co-working in a corporate environment will be moving more towards a kind of a functionality, a typology within the office space. We start to label work cafeterias or e-cafes as co-working spaces, and in that context, in a corporate context, co-working basically means working of employees from different silos, from different departments, creating a cooperation space within companies. So overall, co-working is only starting in Poland. We just had a research with our subcontractor, actually, who told us that there are 300 co-working spaces in Poland. One might think it's a lot. Actually, it's nothing. It's a peanuts compared to the Western markets. This is a starting trend, and we are only going to see it growing in the near future. Do you have any other questions? Happy to discuss. Anything related to office?
Yeah, one question related to some years ago trendy solution with chill-out rooms, gaming area, etc. Still something to do for the people, or passé?
It really depends. It is part of infrastructure. But I think hopefully we are over the times when everyone needed to have a chill out and play football and a football table. It's over because we are far more sophisticated when it comes to the design of a space. Well, each company, each group of users is a separate community, and I really as a background, I'm urban planner, and I like to compare corporate to depending on the size, to the village or a small town. And each of the community needs a special touch, special research, and it comes pretty much. It really exemplifies in these common spaces, in kitchen spaces, in the chill-out spaces. Well, the label is label, but really functions could be different. So we did committed chill-out rooms that were actually very quiet rooms, libraries or meditation rooms, and also under the label of a chill-out room, we've committed the places with PlayStation, with boxing facilities, made really for a big activity. So each typology could be really redefined and stretched to the limits depending on the client. This comes with experience design, that we can't really say, well, chill out room here, a necessity. We need to ask users what they would like to have and really make it for them. The gone is time when we were able, as designers, as architects, as consultants, just come to the client and tell them, you need that. Well, this is the brief for you. The client needs to tell us a brief. And of course, the big challenge is that clients, sometimes they don't know what they want, in a sense that they have difficulty to express it. But in reality, they all know what they want. It's on us, the big task, to understand it and extract it and turn it into space. So the chill-outs, yes, but not the kind of typical chill-outs. And forget about darts.
Yes, another question. Knowing that shared service centers are growing, employee wise, and also functions are changing, what is your view on let's say, optimal lease length for fixed area from tenant point of view?
Well, obviously, if I was a tenant, I would go for the shortest lease possible. That would be in my interest. If I was a landlord, I would go for the longest one. I am an advisor, and I try to advise something in between 5 to 7 years, which is historically very short, and actually makes life for many occupiers difficult. Just to give you an example, typical process takes around 24 months, and people live there for another 24, 30 months, and again, we start a new process. So basically, with these lease terms, we are constantly in a process. But actually, and this is, I think that's a really good question, in a sense that we are getting to the core of the things. Because our Western colleagues, when they tell us about activity-based office or a smart office, they think in a much more, their thinking is embedded in a far more stable environment. Whereas for us, it's a constant change. This 5 years lease agreement really puts us on a constant move. And we are struggling, we are trying to make our clients who are occupiers to get the best of it, to profit on that constant change. So what I'm saying about is that, again, many companies are trying to get into a very advanced model in a leap, simply because they know this is the only chance for them, because the next one will be in 10 years' time, and who knows what will be there in 10 years' time. And we are in a comfortable position to tell them that you don't have to leap, you just can make a step, and then already start to think about the next step, because next 5 years lease will come very, very soon. So instead of being revolutionary, we can be evolutionary on this market. And in that sense, it's a big advantage for occupiers. And if I was a shared service center occupier, I would change my space as often as possible on this market.
So as you're making the transition happen from a traditional to a smart office space, what in your experience are the 2-3 key things that you can do? What are the 2-3 key things that you can do in order to really fully integrate your employees on that move?
Change management. The simple answer is that. I mean, it will not happen without people. I mean, my fear for this conference from the panels I've heard yesterday, that there is still a lot of top-down approach. Build and they will come approach. Give them and they will use it. No, it's not a truth. They won't use it if you give them without really telling them what they should use. And there is no more now us and them. Yesterday, one of the panelists said something that really thrilled me, that there is no hierarchy in her company because everyone can email her. Hey, we are not in a times where people can email you and this is showing lack of a distance. Lack of a distance is when you sit with your MD and you sip your coffee, your morning coffee with your MD, and you have a direct access to everyone in your company. Gone are the times of a strict hierarchies, rigid reporting, vertical connectivity. Now we are living in a times of an overwhelming network, and within the company and outside of the company. And the companies that are the best, the most flexible, agile companies, they're really embracing that to the full. They spread responsibilities, they delegate tasks, and they are good at getting feedback on all levels. So the best projects, when you think about office, your office needs to support that, but your office needs to be a result of such a feedback, collective feedback from your company. I haven't come through the client who would be able to do it by themselves yet. I hope in the future that my service in that respect will not be needed, because companies will be good enough to ask their people, collect the feedback, and get it back. These days, when we come to the companies, many companies, they don't even have facilities to ask their employees. They ask us to provide them internet questionnaires. I think this is a huge gap.
You mentioned that oftentimes when designing offices, the 40-year white male was taken into consideration instead of a 25-year-old female. If you change that approach, what are the practical implications, the consequences for the office space? What would be changing in that office also from technology perspective?
We thought for a long time that we can make office buildings for everyone in a sense. Well, they need to be more inclusive than ever. But the space parameters, we can't fight with it. Often when we come to the clients, the big comment about open spaces is that they don't provide adequate environment for everyone, because there is 10, 20, sometimes 100 people who really expect different conditions, and there is this constant, what we call klima struggle, when people just turn it on, turn it off, turn it on, turn it off, because somebody wants it different. We can't change that. We need to live in the same environment. But the key to comfort is mobility, because as an end user, I can change my location and adapt, and get into an environment that suits me better for a given moment than environment than I was assigned. So mobility in the office, activity-based office, in that sense, is a solution for that kind of problem. And another solution is technology that is coming, and this is exactly what Czarek was saying in the last panel. We are getting much more smarter in terms of adapting actual building parameters to actual users' needs. This is a big part of the wellness movement, and in the future we do expect that many buildings, office buildings, will react on us personally. We will be entering the space, and the space will adapt to our actual needs. So if I am maybe not male, but 40 years old, female, white female, they would know my basic parameters because I would program them in a system, but they would also, the space would recognize my actual need for that day. It is coming, but this is going to be a part of infrastructure, and to be honest, personally, I'm not worried about it because a lot of people are implementing that in a new generation of office buildings.
There was said as well something about the requirements of offices of millennials and Generation X in terms as well of technology. It was said that it's not anymore the hard technology that you see, the monitors, the screens everywhere. It's more about the connectivity and how you work and interact in the new workspace. So my question would be, what are the types of those enablers in the new smart offices as well for in terms of how to cooperate? Can you give some examples?
Well, I'm afraid we are still thinking pretty much traditionally in terms of a space how we create it for millennials. And the trouble with millennials is that when it comes actually to, we have a lot of myths about millennials and Generation Z. We think they will be very different. When it came in our millennial reports, the one you can get from our stand, that actually they are pretty much, as a cohort, they are pretty much similar to X generation. What is a differentiator is the approach to technology and the mobile technology, and we expect this is going to impact the space. Millennials are still pretty low in the corporate hierarchies. They are, but the oldest of them are around 35, so they are only now getting to CEO's positions, unless it's a startup and everyone is CEO there. But in a big corporate environment, they are only now getting to the responsible positions. We can hear their voice, and for the moment, they ask for the same things as Generation X. To me personally, it's pretty much disappointing. I don't see much of the impact yet on the office design. In the future, we expect them to impact more. But since they are so much technology orientated, it might not express itself in a space as much as we would expect. So, for example, they won't ask us for new typologies because their needs will be satisfied pretty much on the screens. That's a big fear. This is only coming now. We haven't seen it yet. We like to joke that for the clients that we are starting processes now, they will end up living in a new space in around 2019, 2020. So they will get in the offices people with a 2 up front. And this is not about the dental status, it's about the date of birth. So we are starting to make offices for people who were born in the year 2000 and 2002. And it's a big mental shift, but we are just waiting for that. My approach is to be open. I try not to put any myths or preconditions on them. I will try to listen to them once they show up. Conscious of time? Last question, maybe, or?
So let's say that we are moving together with our employees to new office, and we would like also involve them in the decision about this new space, but of course not from the beginning because it will be a very long process. So we would like to involve them in, like the chill out zones and some other ideas how they can be involved in this design.
And please don't follow that path. You need to involve them from the beginning. I understand that corporate environment is not a democracy, but we need to involve our employees from the very beginning. And this is a new paradigm of experience design, and you will hear about it anytime soon from us. But please remember to involve them. Okay, thank you very much for this. It was really a pleasure. Now we have a coffee break. Happy to chat, discuss things.